In tonight's episode, Lene Marlin, Rod Stewart, Joe Walsh and Billy Squier.
Where's our musical mystery tour going to take us today? The last few episodes it's been taking us to some different countries, which is great, which is what I really wanted a part of all this crushed custard stuff and the random album generator game in particular to be. So what's come out today? Well, what's come out today is something from Norway, and this is Lene Marlin. I've said that in as close as I can get to sort of the way you're supposed to say it in Norwegian, according to Alexa, who's just given me a little bit of a idea what it sounds like in Norwegian. So that's it. I'll put a picture of the album up here because this is one from the CD cupboard that is in the other room, and I'm far too lazy to be bothered to get up and go and fetch it. And also, if I keep on doing that all the time, it wears me out. It's a tiring job, this. I have to do other things as well. So, anyway, we'll put a picture up there. And the interesting thing as well is there are two different covers, because the cover that you see most isn't the same as the cover that I'd got on mine. So you're probably going to find you'll get it swap, it change halfway through me talking. So, Lene Marlin then. So, how did I come across her? Well, as I've told everybody before, I really got heavily into female singer-songwriters in that sort of mid-90s stuff, with all that sort of female angst stuff coming along with your Alanis Morissette and your Heather Novas and all those sort of people. And all the Lynn went into the Lilith Fairtime thing, didn't it? With your sort of Sarah McLachlans and your Sheryl Crows and all those. And that got me interested in listening to more and more female singers. Now, this album we're talking about today is Lene Marlin's debut album, which came out in 1999. Now, I first came across it in the year 2000. I'd recently just come out of a long-term relationship that I've been in for 15 odd years, and life was a little bit disjointed, if you like. Who knows what was going to be happening and whatever. Anyway, there was this young lady that I was quite friendly with at the time, and she was heavily into her music as well. And she'd said to me, "Listen to this, try this." And I thought, it looks like it might be just like pop music to me. And in those days, I'd still got nothing about it. Oh, it's going to be saccharine tinge pop. I don't want it. But I listened to it, and I thought, actually, yeah, it's all right. It's not bad. It's quite good. It's okay. But it didn't blow me away. Then, this is what I'm getting to this story now. About 8 or 9 years later is around the time when I started doing music reviewing, sort of semi-professionally, if you like, just purely by accident to start with. And then I ended up doing it. And I got involved with a few online things and websites and magazines and stuff and whatever. I was generally thought I was as somebody who did a lot of the what they call, by then already started to call classic rock, but also female singer-songwriter stuff. And I got this sort of what do you say it would be? Well, I could just pick whatever I wanted to write about, really, retrospectively, to see what was around. I dug this out of the cupboard in about, like I say, it must have been about 2008, 2009, something like that. I listened to it for probably 8 or 9 years, but by this time, of course, my appreciation of the female singer-songwriter had got even better, and I'd probably, obviously I'd got older, but I'd probably broadened my views about what I was prepared to listen to and stuff. I started listening to a lot more sort of jazz and a lot more folk. I would listen to folk music years and years ago. It's like folk music now, sort of sticking your finger in your ear and whatever. But the older you get, the more sensible you become, allegedly. And so then you start listening to stuff, so anyway, I thought, yeah, I'll try this again. And I put it on, and I thought, do you know what? This has just been sat in our cupboard for like 8-9 years. I haven't been sat in the cupboard because I've moved around quite a lot, to be fair. So it spent most of its time in packing case, probably. But anyway, it required me to do a complete re-evaluation because I've got to listen to this again. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to look back now because I've got it here on the computer at some of the things that I wrote there. So remember now, this album had been sort of given to me when it was relatively new, and I listened to it and thought, yeah, it's okay. Then, sort of 8 or 9 years later, I suddenly decided that it was really good. And like I say, I even thought that then. I can see right here. I said whether it is the result of the passing of time, the mellowing of the musical mind, or simple natural progression from 30s to mid-30s to mid-40s, which I was at the time, not now. I don't know, but I sure appreciate this album far more now than I did then. And the fact of the matter is, I still appreciate it as much now as I did then as well. And Lene Marlin's voice, it's a nice, delicate voice, but it's got a lot of emotion. It's heartfelt. It's really good at putting across feelings and all that sort of stuff. Some people would say, oh, it's a bit weak and it's a bit light, but I don't think it is. She's not going to be able to, probably not going to be able to belt out some of those like angry young women type tracks, but she doesn't need to because her ability is somewhere else, and it's the softer songs, and it only really becomes apparent after you've been listening to it for a few times. They're songs that they sort of gradually soak in. You know, it's like people say, well, what is it you're supposed to oil a chopping board? I don't know, I can't remember. But it's at least like the more you put it in, then the better the board becomes, and all that, or in a surfboard or something. I don't know. But with a real foot-tapping bit of Lilith Fair type pop sitting down here, it's really good. And it actually got to the dizzy heights of number 5. Yeah, number 5 on the UK singles chart at the time. Now, that was in the days when you needed to sell a few copies to get to number 5. I could put a single out tomorrow, sell it to a few thousand people, and I'd be in the charts. Back in those days, you couldn't. You had to sell a few to get anywhere near the sort of chart activity. So that was good. He also got into the top 10 in 6 other countries, mostly in Scandinavia, but one of the countries where it was a big hit was New Zealand. So I know I've got a couple of people who subscribe and watch from down under, so let me know what the effect of Lene Marlin was in New Zealand and also Australia, because I've got some Australian people, and that's only a short walk, isn't it, from New Zealand. Anyway, there's also another poppy type track on there, which is called Where I'm Headed, and that was used in a film. It was in a French romantic comedy, Mauvaises Fréquentations, which was actually retitled Bad Company in English, which is rather strange, isn't it? Because that links back in to our sort of music that we normally talk about, and one of my favourite bands, Bad Company. So if you see that film around, Bad Company in English, it's Mauvaises Fréquentations or something in French. So there you go. The album itself topped the charts in Norway, and it went top 20 in several other countries, including the UK. So I'm not talking here about a person that nobody's ever heard of. And back to 1999 again, MTV Europe, of course, were around then, and they gave her the Best Nordic Act Award. And also got the Best Single Award for sitting down here at the Norwegian equivalent of the Grammys. Now, I can't recall what the Norwegian equivalent of the Grammys is called, but whatever it is called, she won it. So have a listen to that if you get a chance. Lene Marlin, Playing My Game. It's a really good, it's a really nice album. If you like that sort of time, the sort of music that was around at that sort of time, then I think you'll probably like it. And there was a lot of good stuff that came out of sort of Scandinavia around that sort of time as well.
The Man in the Attic.
Hello there, and welcome to another Man in the Attic session. This one, Joe Walsh, So What? This is an album of Joe's from 1974. There's the back sleeve, Joe looking very mysterious, very dapper. And it is the third album that he recorded after he left the James Gang. There's the inner sleeve, So What, and the reverse side of the inner sleeve with all the details of musicians, etc., and where and when it was recorded. Although it's the third album that he recorded from his departure from the James Gang, it can be looked upon really as his first proper solo album, because it followed on from hang on. It followed on from this one from 1972, Barnstorm, and this one, which is an absolute corker of an album, The Smoker You Drink, The Player You Get. But they were more of a band, and in fact some people refer to it as Barnstorm, because it had the same bass player and drummer, Joe Vitale on drums, Kenny Passarelli on bass, and on The Smoke You Drink they added a keyboard player. But on this album, So What, it's more varied, and different people appear on it. It's not the same personnel on every track, although Joe Vitale and Kenny Passarelli sounds like a pasta dish, doesn't it? Kenny Passarelli are on quite a lot of the tracks. They're not by any means on all of them. And also it's probably has a slightly more laid back vibe than the Barnstorm and Smoker You Drink Get albums. A little more West Coast, which in and of itself not a bad thing, but still the same kind of vibe really, but slightly less rocky. In fact, on So What, he recorded re-recorded, should I say, a track from the Barnstorm album called Turn to Stone. Probably a slightly better version than the Barnstorm album one, but just a little bit different. Same kind of pace, but probably more laid back in its approach. But this is a good album nonetheless. Very, very well produced. Produced by the same people as the first two albums, Bill Smismic, or however you might pronounce his name, and Joe Walsh involved in the production as well. But on this, also on So What, on a couple of the tracks, you have Don Henley from the Eagles appearing, and bear in mind this was 2 years before Hotel California, so yeah, he's already getting involved with that sort of vibe, and it's probably, this has more of an atmosphere of the music of Hotel California, perhaps more eagerly, perhaps just that slightly more laid back approach. I really like the preceding album, The Smoke You Drink, because if for nothing else, it has Rocky Mountain Way on it, which is an all-time classic. And in fact, I played that in a covers band that I played in the early 2000s. Great song to play. But yeah, it's this, I would say, So What probably has more variation than the other albums. Probably more of a pop edge, slightly more. Again, I've said it already, but again, more laid back. But Joe Walsh has been like that in his solo career. I mean, he goes on to produce albums like There Goes the Neighbourhood, which had that had his big hit single on it, of the title of which I cannot remember at the moment. And Life's Been Good to Me, that's the one. It had that on it. And so he's always been fairly varied in his approach, Joe Walsh. But I would say, if you do ever come across this, I paid the almighty price at Record and Tape Exchange in Notting Hill back in the day of 50p. And whilst the cover's a bit, it's probably seen better days, it's an American one, so they were more card oriented than the laminate ones we had in the UK. The vinyl is in absolute pristine condition. I played it again just before doing this, just to reacquaint myself with it. And yes, very good. It's something I would play again. Joe himself plays keyboards on some of the tracks on this album. Mellotron, ARP synthesizers and Moogs and things like that too. And probably a more varied approach, which comes from using different musicians, I suppose. But yeah, all in all, very good, very well recorded, very well produced, and a great sound. So yeah, highly recommended. If you see one and you can get it cheap, go for it. So thanks again, see you again, and goodbye from the man in the attic. See you soon.
Billy Squier, Don't Say No, from 1981. Now this is the only Billy Squier album in my collection, well, the only straight up Billy Squier album in my collection, because I've got the two albums he did with a band called Piper before going solo. Now the reason I've got this is because he was the support band for the 1981 Whitesnake tour, so I saw him live on that tour, and I thought it was pretty good. And it was, in those days, it was the sort of thing you can afford to go out and buy an album, because they weren't ridiculously expensive, really. Back in those days, a new chart album, I'd say you could pick it up for $3.99, or probably even less than that in some places. Even the more expensive ones were only around about a fiver. So it was easier to take a bit of a chance. I suppose people will say to me now, well, that's the joy of downloading and streaming and all that. That you can listen to it before you even have to buy that, or as in the case of so many people, which something that I can't get my head around, is that they don't actually ever own anything physically. I mean, I know I've got a huge amount of music on a hard drive, but that isn't something that I sat down and decided that I was going to do. Right, I'm going to just get all this on that. That was stuff that came to me through another project, which as I said before, when we were going to do the internet radio program and all that sort of stuff, and it wasn't practical to go out and buy 10,000 albums, or get hold of 10,000. I saw them. You would get on a sort of a promotional sort of thing where you would have got them for free anyway. So we just at that time, as I said, accepted it all digitally. So that's why I've got such a large collection. Because when all that lot didn't end up happening, a part of the thing at the end was I was allowed to keep all the music, which was pretty good. I must admit, for a while I spent a long time copying it onto CDs so I could play it on my decent stereo system. Now, these days, thanks to a chap called Clint at Moraz, he set me up with a brilliant amp, which I've taken charge of just a few weeks ago, which I can actually now plug a laptop through a HDMI port into a proper sort of audiophile quality 2.1 stereo system and play it as though it was on a CD. And there's an app that comes up, so it's almost like like iTunes, I suppose, sort of thing, and you can do it like that, but it's coming out in the proper sort of quality that you want through the stereo and the big speakers, and that's great. But anyway, and that's one of the reasons why we started exploring a little bit more of what is on there digitally. But I'll say the anorak in me that prefers to have the real thing in his hand on many an occasion. I've listened to something off there and then thought, I wonder how much I could pick a copy of that up for, and then you have a look and then you find, it's only cheap, there's loads of them around, and then so you end up getting a physical one anyway. But I am rapidly, as anybody that's ever been to visit Crushed Custard Central will tell you, rapidly running out of space for all this stuff. So it's a good job so it is on there. Anyway, I'm going off the point now because I'm supposed to be talking about Billy Squier, Don't Say No, from 1981. Now, I probably played this album for about 15, 20 years, and I was convinced it was called The Stroke. It isn't. There's a track on there called The Stroke. Whether it was re-released anywhere else called, I don't know. But I mistakenly referred to it as The Stroke for absolutely ages. Never heard of Billy Squier called The Stroke. Anyway, it's called Don't Say No. There's a track called The Stroke on it, which is obviously one of the better tracks on it. I think that came out as a single, and probably did reasonably well as well. Lonely's and Night's another on there. There's another track called I Need You that's on there. There's a couple that I don't like. Sometimes he can get into a sort of an annoying sort of falsetto vocal, which he does on Nobody Knows, which I don't like too much. And then there's another one on there that I think probably got put out as a single and probably did quite well in rock. It's called My Kind of Lover, but it's very, very repetitive, and that tends to get on my nerves just a little bit. But apart from that, it's all right. Now, the funny thing was, I say we saw Billy Squier on the 1981 Whitesnake tour, and it was good. This album was good, but for some reason I never bought any more. I've got nothing after that. After this is the most recent Billy Squier album I've got. 1981. Don't Say No. As I said before, I've got the two Piper albums from the late 70s that he did before going solo. So if there's any Billy Squier experts out there, point me in the direction of what, if any, of his other albums would be worth a listen. I have to say I do like the two Piper albums, and this one, there's more positives than negatives. And when I used to do written reviewing and stuff on a 5-star reviewing site, I actually gave this one 3.5, so you can tell it's more good than bad. Well worth tracking down again. 1981 album. I'm not sure if it's hard to get hold of. I'm sure there's thousands and thousands of copies over in America. I'm not sure whether there's that many over here, but it's well worth tracking down. He did have a bit of a time in 1981 when he was quite sort of high profile doing the Whitesnake tour, and tracks like The Stroke and My Kind of Love were played in rock clubs all over the place around then. So that's Billy Squier, Don't Say No, 1981. Plus a lot of waffle. I've got to be careful here. I'm going to do this next album because one of my super fans, subscriber from day one or whatever, is a massive Rod Stewart fan, and this one has come out on the random album generator. Fortunately for me, it's my favourite Rod Stewart album, which everybody will now know means it's one of the early ones, and it's 1970s Gasoline Alley. Now, there are two camps, I suppose, on when it comes to Rod Stewart. There are people who think of him in his time with the Faces and everything, and the early solo albums when he was what you'd call a proper, decent rock singer, good blues soul rock voice. Then there's the late 70s, 80s, leopard skin trousers prancing around like a twerp. Now, a lot of people say it's the biggest sellout in the history of music. Sure, Rod Stewart will agree with everybody and quite happily sit there and smile and say, well, I don't mind because I'm going to have a string of 6-foot blondes on my arm and I've got 8 million quid in the bank and I'm basically living the life of Riley. So I don't think it's that bad. And to be fair as well, when you listen to some of his later albums, which, as we've said before, as I've just said, they are a little bit whatever, but there still was one or two half decent tracks in there, and he can sing, and he started to a bit later on, didn't he, start making more serious sort of albums again, and they were good. And I do know some people, including the aforementioned superfan, who have been to see him quite recently, and you can't argue with the fact that the bloke puts on a good show. It might cost a fortune, but he does put on a good show. So he's one of those. He would be, wouldn't he? He would be one of those sort of like royalty types, like your sort of Paul McCartney's and your John Lennon's and your Mick Jaggers and all them. Apart from the fact that there's the "Do You Think I'm Sexy" and the leopard skin trousers and all that stuff, which just turned a lot of people off to him. So anyway, this is way before then. We were way back in the time with the faces and stuff still. Gasoline Alley, 1970. As I said, probably my favourite all-time Rod Stewart album. Country Comforts, absolute classic. Far better than any other version of it. Cut Across Shorty, that's another one that is really good, and that's got some excellent guitar work on it as well. And the Rod Stewart vocal on that one is really good. The other really standout track on the album is "I Don't Want to Discuss It," which it almost sounds like Led Zeppelin sometimes. It's got that sort of thing. You can, if you go back to sort of Rod Stewart's stuff with Jeff Beck, you can tell that he was capable of doing all that on a Robert Plant stuff anyway if he wanted to. Brilliant stuff. I would say anybody that's only aware of what is commonly referred to as the sellout stuff, that you know the pop singles, the "Do You Think I'm Sexy" stuff and all that. Listen to this album instead. It's brilliant. I mean the opening track, which is the title track, "Gasoline," and that's just packed full of sort of melancholy, and it's just a really nice song. My Way of Giving, that's got a sort of 60s feel about it, and there's a Rolling Stone cover on there as well. It's All Over Now, maybe a little bit too similar to a Rolling Stones version, but it's still worth its place. There's the obligatory early 1970s Bob Dylan track on there, "Only a Hobo," and then you've got "Lady Day" and "Joe's Lament," which are probably the two weakest tracks on the album, but they're still pretty good. And so that's it then. Gasoline Alley, Rod Stewart. Don't just disregard those early 70s albums of Rod Stewart. Think of the Faces and the early Rod Stewart albums as one, and then all the top of the pop shenanigans as something else. Hopefully, my Rod Stewart superfan friend isn't going to throw a pint of beer over me next time I see them in the pub.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider pressing the like and subscribe buttons. See you soon.